To everybody, and I'm very pleased to have the possibility to address you with this very important subject. As we all know, women are human beings, and being human beings, human rights belong to women, and women's rights are human rights. Very simple as that, but that does not happen, as we know, in all of the places in everyday life. And so this is one of the reasons that after the Beijing Declaration, women's organizations have worked with women politicians very hard to get a Istanbul Convention on place. And Istanbul Convention is a convention against all forms of violence against women and domestic violence. And this is very broad definition, and that's why I'm going to go through some of the major points there. It states that the state has a responsibility to prevent all forms of violence against women, protect those ones who experience it, and prosecute the perpetrators. So prevent, protect, and prosecute. The state must promote equality between men and women. So it is not only passive act then when the violence exists. It says promote equality and prevent violence against women by encouraging mutual respect on non-violent conflict resolution and questioning gender stereotypes that make women quite often vulnerable towards different types of violence. And that includes teaching, teaching materials in schools, media, and that includes the societal practices. The state must investigate allegations of violence and prosecute the perpetrators. And this is not even nowadays always the case when it comes, for example, the question of a rape within a marital state or a intimate partnership. The state must protect and support those who experience violence, for example, by removing perpetrators from the house to make sure the person affected stays safe, and by offering sufficient and accessible shelters. This is very much a work in progress in many of the EU member states, and not even perfect, as you might know, in Finland. And then the state must ensure that the victims can claim compensation from the offender and must be awarded adequate compensation itself, but it cannot be covered from the other sources. So the state cannot compensate for example, in the cases if the offender wouldn't be in economic troubles. The state must ensure a coordinated approach among all relevant agencies, civil society organizations, and other stakeholders to support those who experience violence and protect them from further violence. And part of that work is the work with the NGO community and women's organizations, the whole society and women, to be aware and understanding of the different types of the violence. Those who experience violence should have information and access to support services such as 24/7 telephone helplines, rape crisis centers, counseling, and shelters. Civil society plays an important role in providing essential services to those who experience violence, raising awareness and helping to change attitudes to create a culture of zero tolerance to violence. Police and justice system professionals should be trained on victims' rights and how to prevent further harm so that they are able to respond to calls for assistance and manage dangerous situations. And as you know, this is not even always the case, that the first encountering a police or inspection system actually would be female friendly or understanding for the situation or supportive or trying with all the efforts to collect the evidence. Well, as you can see, and I'm going to come back with some special cases and elements of the violence to be noted, a rather significant convention. And nowadays it is signed by, the convention is signed by all the European member states, excluding the Turkey itself, who announced the withdrawal from the Istanbul Convention, quite a shame for them, not so long ago. But we still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 European members who have not ratified the convention. So all what we can do as European Parliament, women politicians, and you as a civil society is to push all the governments to ratify the Istanbul Convention. And even more important is the big fight what we are having between the Parliament and the Commission and Council nowadays is to make EU to ratify as an entity the Istanbul Convention. And what it makes is that in that case that the EU would, and it should, ratify the convention, the EU would have the powers to intervene in those member states where the implementation of the convention is lagging behind, is poor or inadequate. So really to ensure that the Istanbul Convention is respected all over Europe and also in all the partnering agreements with the EU, this ratification needs to happen. And you can guess that those member states who have not yet ratified, especially some of our Eastern partners, are yet pushing against the ratification. And I would call this one of the big tasks of us women in upcoming years to ensure that this ratification really happens. So what kind of implications it would have and what kind of things it has is an introduction of a new class of criminal offenses that are gender-based. And that should happen in member state level, in country level, but that should happen also in the EU level. And why we do have the public prosecutor, the Parliament is pushing forward that the public prosecutor in the EU level could intervene and these mass cases to take as a prosecutor role to prosecute the perpetrators of female violence. Plus, then it has an impact in Commission preparation of a legislation. And here I would just like to take one example, and this is this ongoing and increasing hate speech online. And quite often this is not understood to be part of the violence, but it is when women, starting from the very young age, are ridiculed because of their opinions, their outlooks, or just because they are girls, or just because they are women, just because they are young, because they are opinionated, or because they are old. So this kind of a labeling and undermining women and their participation and trying to prevent their participation in societal issues, it is a violence against women. And we need to put an end, a stop on the violence online against women also. And this actually has been alarmingly increasing in Europe, the online hate speech of different forms against the gender. It can be direct, calling the names, ridiculing, pointing out, but it can be also indirect by, let's say, putting in quotes neutral criticism. But in the case that the male politicians get 10 aggressive or undermining comments, the female counterpart gets 100 or 1,000. It can be women in working positions, politically active, civil society active, but it is targeting the women, even though the gender, woman, or any female specificities would not be mentioned there. Then we need to put in place first the awareness, like about the hate speech, but also about the structural violence. And I would like to remind you that the structural violence is a part of the violence against women. In a case you are unemployed, there are no social services. You might be a single mother without any daycare services, or a caretaker of your parents or your spouse's parents, without any accessible support, be it service or be it financial support. That is a structural violence, because that prevents women fully participating the work life or the societal life. And this is very true in very big number of our member states still, and in all over the Europe. So the violence is physical violence. It is psychological violence, like the hate speech. It is stalking. It is, of course, sexual violence, like touching or naming or harassing. It's forced marriage. It is forced abortion, forced female genital mutilations, forced sterilization. But it is also those structures that prevent women on having the equal say and the equal footing in the society and being full partners, getting educated, getting promoted in the university careers, getting promoted in the careers in civil life, not having the work-life balance in place, or whatever these forms are. So raising awareness and having the tools to take this into account when we are creating European and national legislation. For example, what is the digital responsibility of the platforms to remove the hate speech that is gendered? Or, for example, about the care strategy, what is the possibility of women of getting accessible, good quality, affordable care services, is all forms of violence that need to be known, identified. They need to be on statistics, and they need to be banned and replaced with good practices. And in addition, this Istanbul Convention sets out the obligation to ensure that culture, customs, religion, tradition, or so-called honor are not regarded as justification for any acts of violence covered by its scope. And it is very important that when some of the member states try to appeal that civil law matters are on national competencies, or that social matters and services are national competencies, that this is not taken as a truth, because it is not. Human rights and constitutional rights are universal. And just in the same way that I can't decide in the Brussels that only blue-eyed people get services, or then in the Strasbourg that only right-handed people get the services, because this is unjustified discrimination. Women's rights can't be limited by member state practices, religious practices, cultural customs, women's places not here or there. And it is EU's liability to protect the women in that kind of a violence, be it structural or any type. And it is our task, dear sisters, to make this happen within the upcoming years. Thank you very much for having the possibility to address you, and of course to congratulate for your amazing birthday.